Hey everybody. Thank you, Zach. Always a wonderful facilitator and host. And it's great to see so many people from around the world joining us today, from Switzerland, from Greece, right across the United States, Singapore, Pakistan, just a couple of countries that I saw as you were putting your information into the chat. So welcome. As Zach said, this is the second part in a three-part series. The first part last week was looking at how we can enhance the student experience, and that has been recorded. The presentation and the recording will be made available after we conclude the whole series. The last session will be next week, and that is going to be looking at access, inclusion, and equity, and the IB programs and the way that they can bridge achievement gaps and include students from diverse backgrounds. So thank you. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce a special guest from our own International Baccalaureate office in The Hague, Terry Walker.
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. I joined the IB office in The Hague about 7 years ago on the learning and teaching team. And then 2 years ago, I moved over to IB World Schools, and I'm an IB World School manager. I really enjoy supporting you and your schools with implementation and evaluation, whether you have one program at your school or up to 4 programs. So I'm really happy to be here, and thanks, Phil, for inviting me to join in.
Very glad to have you, Terry, and your expertise and sharing all of the sorts of insights that you have from the schools that you work with as well. You might notice just in the corner there, we have a hashtag IB for all. And what we mean by that is that we know that we have students that are really capable of doing the IB that don't always choose the diploma route. And we are also not only in some of the most selective K-12 schools around the world, but we're also serving low-income populations in inner cities around the world, and particularly in the US, and having excellent impact on the lives of young people. So IB for All is something that we're talking a lot about and centering this presentation around that as well. So just briefly, for those of you who are unaware, in late 2019, an initiative to form a new department to support departments across the organization and to be able to be also facing into the IB community globally was started. It's called the Strategic Initiatives Innovation and Incubation Team, directed by Ashish Trivedi from the Singapore office. And he has a long experience also in IB World Schools and particularly in the MYP. But we go through a process of listening to schools and working alongside schools, consulting with schools, and then doing mass engagements like this to report back and to share some of these insights. So this is my contact information and where you can find me on social media. If you'd like to get in touch by email, please do so. As we work to improve the way that we serve schools in the IB in a variety of ways, not just through this department, but across all departments. So initially, we have a couple of enablers and barriers or challenges that we know that schools face when we're trying to attract students to the IB, and particularly when we're messaging to parents and students. So, Terry, jump in at any time if you wanted to elaborate on any of these as they look in, what they look like in some of the schools that you've been in. But to begin with, just looking at some of these enablers, I think we should begin with our strengths. And a lot of this presentation is helping us to elevate the IB value propositions, what signifies an IB education above and beyond some of the competitive opportunities. And we know that in many of our schools, these competitive opportunities often run alongside the IB. And while schools are really, really driven to get IB more students to take on the IB, due to maybe some misconceptions, students are choosing other options. So the broad and balanced curriculum needs to be explained, because sometimes people think that broad and balanced means not specific. But as we know, our IB students are highly prepared for university, highly motivated to go into innovative and technical fields. And, that broad and balanced curriculum helps them to understand the place of those disciplines. So we need to leverage that along with obviously the intercultural understanding, the multilingual approach that we have right through PYP, MYP, DP, and CP, and the learning-centered focus. It's in our IB mission statement. It's at the core of our programs with the learner profile, but approaches to learning skills and the conceptual understanding and applicable knowledge are some of those enablers.
You know, I read a lot about education because obviously it's a passion of mine coming from an educational background for many years. And uh, lately, almost every educational expert that I have read talks about preparing students for this unknown future. You hear them all the time saying we're preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. And I think that, you know, one of the benefits to an IB education, particularly in the DP and CP, is that we are building the skills and attitudes in our students that will help them be able to face this unknown future that these educational experts talk about.
Exactly. I think one of the barriers that we'll begin with is just talking about the level of difficulty and deconstructing terms like rigor, challenging. I think that we need to be much clearer that what's rigorous for somebody else might not be rigorous for me, and what I find really challenging might come easily to other people. And I think that when we're looking at rigor and challenge, we can think about how we are doing so within a growth mindset. So deconstructing that for parents and students really can, help to bring down some of that, the misconceptions that it's unapproachable. In some schools, we might also need to interrogate how we're implementing the program, whether or not being balanced, which is part of the learner profile, is actually part of the student experience, and listening to our student cohort to ensure that they do have those systems of support that they need. And we have a couple of ideas for you in this session as well. We know that college is important. We know that that is the goal for most of our students. But more and more we're seeing the industries evolve. We're seeing learning evolve. We're seeing the way that we approach further learning evolve. And I think we need to help students to open their minds to all of the things that they need to be able to do in terms of their further learning beyond the diploma scores and getting into the best university.
Yeah,
I didn't happen to, go to the best, kind of prestigious. I went to a small liberal arts college, and I think that many people that do that end up sometimes going to selective graduate schools for further study. But you really got to find that learning experience that resonates with you. Sorry, Terry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, that's fine. Sorry to interrupt you. I agree with you completely. I mean, I think that student success is something that we want for all students, but I think we also need to keep in our minds that, what we're building in our students is much more than a test can measure.
And we've mentioned competitive programs already, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then looking again at some, in some contexts, in some school cultures, we have that split between students that we say are IB capable and then students that are not capable of the IB. And we have to be very, very careful that we don't create that culture. And that can happen on its own. That's often very unintentional. But we do need to acknowledge those cultural elements when even the students start to talk about, well, I'm not like them, Terry, I think that you explain really well those assumptions that we make on behalf of students.
Yeah, I spoke to a school a couple of weeks ago about how I could support them to increase their cohort of their DP students. And one of the comments that one of the leadership team members made to me during our chat was that, they're really focusing on getting their students into their local universities. And it kind of struck me during the conversation that we had was, if you really want to increase your cohort, then maybe don't assume that all of the students that you have in your school or future students coming to your school want to be channeled into the university within that country, that you can attract perhaps more students to your school if you broaden the offers beyond your country borders. So it's
That's
about being
yeah.
careful about assuming what you think your students want.
And I think we have to be careful when it comes to the era of technologies as well, that we're not assuming that every student needs to go into a particular field, and that because the world has demand that the students, are going to be good at that or they're going to enjoy doing that. I think that we need to really listen to what students are interested in. So taking that assumptions point and applying it in many different situations to what we think we're doing for students and whether or not that's in line with how students see themselves.
Mhm.
I did see pop up that there was a question that might be best answered now. I'm not sure. Zach, do you see um, the question in the Q&A? Perhaps
That
we don't.
question might be directed just towards you. I don't see it, Phil.
Okay. Um, if you do have a question and it's about a specific aspect, please put it in the Q&A, and Zach's following along with that. It's just keep it separate from the main chat so that we know where those questions are. And we will address them either at the end, or if it makes sense to, we'll stop and do that for you now. So some of the common misconceptions, we've sort of talked about those in the barriers moment, but looking at what we need to study in order to do what particular discipline. Obviously, the diploma program is a well-rounded program that gives students the opportunity to study right across the different subject areas. And the way the programs are developed are intended to be interactive, interconnected. So theory of knowledge at the core obviously is helping students to make those connections conceptually, and enabling students to see that if you're going to be an engineer, the communication skills that you need to be able to ideate, to be able to present those ideas, to pitch those ideas are really critical. Understanding the human experience through the individuals and societies field is just as important as the math and the science that's involved in engineering. And this also, I identify with the student over here on the top right. When I was in school, I didn't feel confident in math. Math was taught to me in a very traditional way from textbooks. Finish these algorithms for homework, and we're going to be practicing these the next day. And now we're moving on. Hope you're with us. Hope you stick with us. And I sort of found that I was able to kind of get on board at the beginning of the year, and as the year went on, I got further and further behind in my math. So I think if my school had have offered the IB program and I had a thought to myself, oh my goodness, I have to take this challenging, rigorous program, and that wasn't explained to me, and I have to be in a math course and it's an IB course, ooh, that's going to be too much. So we just need to bear in mind that there may be areas that students are not talking about, and
Yeah.
thinking through the messages that can help them to understand the IB fully.
Yeah, I think that quote makes me feel a little sad because we all know that IB teachers are trained in the subjects that they teach, and teachers anywhere, IB or not IB, want students to succeed. So I think, we need to reassure students that if they feel that they have some difficulties in a subject area, that their teachers are there to support them and to ensure that they feel a success and confident.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Similarly, with the career-related program, which is really becoming an exciting, I mean, I think it's always been exciting, but even now, in the industry that we're in, this remote learning environment, there's a remote work, they're calling it the gig economy, where people are, professionally contracting themselves and working all over the world. I've got a number of friends that don't go to an office maybe once a month or twice a year to meet with their teams, but ultimately their entire work is always online. But in this in the CP misconceptions is often around rigor. If you think about going into a technical field, looking at biomedical engineering or other types of engineering, computer sciences, even when it comes down to culinary arts, I mean, there are there's food, the Food Network runs, tons of TV shows that are about the science and the chemistry, involved
Yeah.
in baking and the artistry of it. There's a lot of rigor involved in just that alone, but put that together with, a reflective project and a core that is about skills development and an exploration of ethics, at such a young age. Often our schools are offering early college programs, like some of our partners are the Savannah College of Art and Design, based out of America. There's Embry-Riddle, which is focusing on aeronautics and aerospace engineering. Those are really rigorous programs, and students are in a university setting where they are working alongside undergraduates that have finished high school. So the organization skills and the things that are expected in the CP are certainly require students to step up. So it's a really great way to have, diversify, but here, these are some of the misconceptions about the way that that we present the CP. So I would like to know what the misconceptions might be in your context, and we'll give you a moment if you have a cell phone or mobile device nearby, or if you'd wish to do this online, there's a short QR code there that perhaps you might need to copy down, or we could put it in the chat. But this is going to take us to a word cloud, and as soon as you're there, it's going to do single words, but it would be great to sort of see what the common themes are when it comes to why you think people might not choose the IB in your school, and what are those misconceptions that are a challenge to explain when it comes to IB education. Just a few more seconds to scan that, and then we'll take a look. Great. Elitist and difficult.
Interesting, yeah.
Too hard, too much.
Difficult.
Yeah, I'm presuming that low and grades probably go together. Workload. It does work to hyphenate if you want to keep some of your terms together if you've got two words. Time consuming. Yep. Very good. Yeah, we'll leave it at that because it seems that people have had an opportunity to contribute. But this is all really great feedback, and I'm glad that you have addressed these. Look at elitists standing out there in the middle. The difference between IB being an elite or excellent world-class educational experience versus being for a certain group of students is a massive difference, a massive area to tidy up. So why IB is our focus at the organization. Everything that we're doing is to help explain why, not just what is an IB education, which we could spend days, trying to reduce what is an IB education down into an elevator speech, as we call it, is really, really difficult. And one of the things that I've noticed is either we have way too much information on people's web pages, or we have not enough. So trying to think, around why is a great strategic focus for marketing the value of an IB education. And a non-IB resource that I'd love to point out is this fantastic book that was recommended to me by one of my marketing friends when I started working at the IB. My first job in the IB was to, and I think I forgot to introduce myself, but as a career educator who taught the diploma program, etc. But my first job was to support schools to become IB schools and to add new programs. Some schools might have only had the DP and were interested in the career-related program, or aligning all of the learning practices with MYP and PYP if they had the full school. But in utility, Jay talks about the way we are consuming information these days. And I don't know what your email inbox looks like, but I'm constantly, every day, if I don't sit down and delete the junk mail so I can keep the things that I do want to see front and center, like an email from mum and dad, I just don't see it because I end up with thousands and thousands of emails if I let that go unattended. And that's just, somewhat, that's leaflets, that's advertising, it's spam. Some organizations and some businesses are sending me 3 emails a day. And I think that what helped me to understand, the information age and how we move beyond that is just that we are self-selecting. In this, they use examples like every time we go to look for dinner, or we're trying to find, a taco restaurant, we'll go to Yelp or some of these apps, and we'll search, in our area for like 5 different restaurants to choose and look at reviews to sort of see which one will we pick. Or maybe it's when we're ordering in right now. Same goes for when it's movies, and as we go up into, buying a car or looking at some of these more expensive items, and then we're looking at the futures of young people and education. The information that we have on hand and at our fingertips should be easy to find. And so this is a really great book to sort of walk through some of those things. He also talks about utility in the sense of service, that we are to provide information. And I think the age of promotion, and forgive me because I think I still use the term promotion in some of these slides, but that information that we choose needs to speak for itself. It needs to be the kinds of messages that our communities are looking for. And so, in each of these presentations, I want to switch up this slide. This is a learner profile slide that I think has a new message. If you want to use the slide, you can always cover up what I've written and write your own words next to it and just use it as a template. But I think that knowing, as Terry pointed out, this changing world, knowing how to learn new things is what is going to define success. It's not just about getting to the next step. It's not just about becoming educated. It's about how we continue to learn and evolve as these industries arise, these newly created jobs, these fields that haven't been even invented yet. And we see the decline of certain industries. In a webinar that I attended recently, there was a point made that there are industries that have gone online because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, but they were already on their way prior to the pandemic and may not return in the way that they were before. So people who have been out of work or have been waiting for those industries to return may not have a job to return to because the world's changing.
Yep, and I think I really like the little sub quote that you had underneath, or just additional piece on that slide where you talked about, the thinkers that have the skills. Well, I would add creative and critical, because I think those are two skills that are really important moving forward. Yeah, with learning how to learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we won't spend much time on this slide because there are lots of different things that we know are true about an IB education. In fact, we did this really interesting exercise with the US IB World Schools team recently in a meeting where we said, what are the claims that we make about IB education, and to what extent are they true universally? What extent are they true depending on the context? And I think it would be a really fun exercise in your school to think about what are the things that we say are the benefits of an IB program and an IB education in our school. What do we see in our students across the board? And how can we ensure that those things that we believe in are supported and continuing to evolve and develop, that sense of we've never fully arrived. So when we present these to stakeholders, I think that the IB is incredibly complex. We have developed a system. Don't forget, it's not just the assessment, it's not just the curriculum framework. We have IBIN who support the workshops and visit schools and examine students and observe those examinations and make sure that they're accountable and aligned. We have a whole range of standards and practices that have just been revised to help schools to improve. Those are not always, they're not just related to curriculum, they're related to how we support the culture of the school and the way that schools are led. Lots of different elements. So reducing that complexity is difficult. And again, thinking through what is it that that our school values and aligning those things to the IB and highlighting those front and center. And
Yeah, I
showcasing
agree.
the element. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, really, I completely agree with you. I think it's about what you promote is what you'll attract.
Yeah, that's a really, really great thing to stand out. I'm gonna use that, Terry. um, yeah, I mean, you can see that I don't need to read these out for everybody. But I think that one thing that I will spotlight is just introducing your IB educators, and we have an example of that in a moment. But we really do probably undervalue the way that students gravitate to adults and gravitate to teachers that are enthusiastic about what they teach, are knowledgeable, are friendly and supportive. And I think trying to get out of the cloud, I guess the I'm searching for the word here, but we're sort of consumed, I guess, by all of the big, university recognition, getting into the next school. What do I want to be when I grow up? Is this going to prepare me? Back down to, will I enjoy this? Will I grow? Will I
Yeah.
be in good hands? So that's something that our teachers can do for our programs.
Yep.
So onto some web tips. Um, I think at the forefront, this whole session is about, talking to parents and students, but I think that when we look at the, united effort that we have to try and have IB recognized alongside other programs or national curriculum around the world, there's been a number of breakthroughs. Even just recently, I know the career-related program has been counted as a high school finishing in a new country, which is yet to be announced officially, but we're constantly working on this effort. And sometimes that we need that to come before we can have, interest in the programs. Or on the flip side, we've got IB diploma programs everywhere. And the more that we have our schools articulating a clear message, we have lots of, searching for what is IB schools in X country, and then your school comes up, and the information that's provided there helps universities or government officials to understand the value of an IB education. One other tip that I've discovered for myself too is just, we can be, when we have a website that, and I think the IB website is something that Zach and his team are working on to really refine the way that, you guys can access materials and not, kind of feel like you're trying to find everything all the time. It's all roads leading back to a central point. What is it that we want people to come back to? And in this case, it would be your website. So if you're providing links, we have links to research, we have links to brochures that explain the diploma program or career-related program. Rather than sending them to a landing page, maybe try linking the actual resource itself, so that when they click on it, the PDF pops out, the research pops out, and then the only way back is to go back to the page that you were already on, which was on your school webpage. And there's some more tips here for visual
Yeah.
messages,
Yeah, I have a couple more too that I could throw in there for your consideration, and that is keep it really clean and simple. The easier it is for people to read what you've got, what you're focused on at your school, the better. And I think, Phil, you've already alluded to this with being style aligned. I would say create a brand for your school and keep that brand going on every page. The other thing is be unique. I support several schools through my job that I love to do. And when I have a few free minutes, I often go to the different websites of the schools that I support. And one thing that another tip is avoid using the language of the IB and copy pasting what is on the Program Resource Center and putting it on your school page. I think it's forgettable. And I think as if parents are exploring a number of schools in your geographic region, they want to see a school that really stands out. They don't want to see the same cookie cutter content from school to school to school. Figure out what makes you stand out from the rest and really focus on that. And I think Phil has a couple of good examples coming up.
What are some of the ways that you market the CP and DP in your community? If you take a moment to type some of those into the chat, and the chat specifically, not the Q&A, that way everybody can see them. And Zach is going to read a couple out to us, if you like. What are some of the ways that you market in your community or to your community?
Okay, we have some answers coming in here. Neighborhood associations.
I see small group presentations and having, perhaps virtual versions of that today, but, having those open houses. And I've seen a lot of them advertised recently because we're in recruitment season. People are trying to recruit students to enroll in the school at large, and also recruiting students to think about the DP or CP.
Yep. Videos, clean websites, regular articles in local newspapers about student
Mhm.
activities, monthly newsletters.
Yes, schools in the US are often organized in school systems, districts, and they have primary years, middle years, and high school. And so a lot of annual efforts are to go to those schools where students
Yeah.
may be coming up and choosing that high school and choosing the IB to go and talk to the students at a younger age. Recruitment for these programs and preparation for these programs starts really early. It's certainly not the year before, is it?
No, no, I have often done tours of parents that have 3-year-olds looking
Yeah.
for a pathway all the way up through the IB, PYP, MYP, and DP. I like the idea of open houses as well. I think if you can get, I know that when I step into a school, I have a really good feel of the IB in the school, and you can sense how it's different from other school experiences that you may have had. So getting them, feet on the ground, walking through the school, it's a good idea.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing your various valuable ways of appealing to your stakeholders. And I hope hopefully there's some great ideas in the chat that you may have not have thought of. So here's an example of too little information. I've removed some key terms here so that we don't, you know, make anybody cross. But when I clicked on home, I went to academics, and then I looked into the what's offered in the senior school for the where we would hope to find the DP and CP, and there was a lot more text, but all it was black and white copy. And this is the only mention of the program, and there was no detail. Now, this actually is probably from when the school was becoming authorized. We understand, and I know from working with schools that there's limitations on what you can say about the IB coming to your school in the early phases. But this is an extreme situation here where there's absolutely there's so little information about what it will be like to be an IB student in this school. And the blackout on the left there, the first blackout is related to a competitive program, which people may or may not be more familiar with than the IB in this context. So it's even more important that we are clear about what the IB stands for. But I have an excellent example here of the IB at work, and this is from the Western International School of Shanghai, showcasing the essence of the IB education. The link there is, and this slide deck will also be available if you miss it, but the Western International School of Shanghai. What I love about this is that when you do click on academics, you can click on IB program, and this happens to be an all IB school from early years all the way through to offering DP and CP. It's one of I think 2 or 3 schools in China at large that offer the career-related program and are doing really, really well with it. But you would come with these tiles, and if you click on any one of these, you end up at the individual page. The drop-down menu there for IB program also has all full programs, so you could go from the menu and find that as well. It's just navigation-wise, it's a really great way to jump in. And then when you get down into the web page, you'll find that one of the first things that they talk about is the IB core. So one of the points we made before was to declutter and to emphasize some of these, traits. And I think if you're dealing with competitive programs, let the IB speak for itself, and please try and avoid comparison statements. If you're an IB student, you'll get to do this. And if you're doing this kind of curriculum, you'll get to do that. Quite often I've seen that, well, what you're saying about the other curriculum is true of the IB. And from what I understand of that other curriculum, what you're saying about the IB is also present in that as well. So it's a little confusing to say, well, I'm going to get this out of my education if I go IB, or I'm going to get this, trying to just be as clear on the facts as possible. And what this school has done to declutter the information is put a PDF that's downloadable front and center. There's even an image to make it very clear. It's not fine print. Get this, handbook to what the diploma looks like in our school. And then you have what are the details of the courses of study? What does assessment look like? What sorts of things will be, what are the units or the themes or the things that we're going to be studying? What is extended essay in more detail? And there's like the life of the school is much clearer. The requirements of the program much more clearly articulated in that handout that they have created. And very little needs to really change once you've made that. It's something that is going to maybe be modified here and there over time, but without getting too much into the scope and sequence or your individual course outlines, where, you know, as we update subjects, you might need to change those things. It's just thinking how holistically, what do students want to know about their IB
Yeah.
education?
What I really like about this page is under the description for TOK and CAS and extended essay, it's simple and it's understandable. It doesn't use IB speak. And to me, it really makes it easy for future students to understand. And it draws them in a very simple and clear way.
Here's another school that I found really terrific. They have quite a great, you know, a really great website. When you land on it, it's got one of the like five you know, images that continue to go on a cycle. And with each image, they are stating their value propositions and what they believe is important in education. And if you like, this is not IB, and yet it's completely IB, right? So there's no mention of the IB, but it is exactly aligned with what the IB is, but it is uniquely this school. And what I also love about their social media at the International School of Luxembourg is it also doesn't mention that they're an IB school. And when you click on learning and you go down the track, they do offer a variety of programs, but they, you know, are predominantly an IB diploma school. And they have a lot of students participating in the full DP. But their identity is you know, broader than being an IB World School, and the quality of the education that they offer is high, and that is very, very clear when you go to their website. Very easy to navigate. And, you know, Terry, we were talking the other day about the systems of support, the wraparound services that students need to know that they can be successful. And this school particularly attracts students from all over the world. Many of your international schools do. Many of your students are language learners, you know, learning to operate in English if that's your operating language. So the way that we support learning is really key. And they've been very intentional to isolate this tile.
Yeah, I think this is a really great idea as well, because it busts that myth about the IB being too, or the DP being too hard for me, right? So as this school has clearly articulated, if you have learning support needs, here's what we offer to you. Here's how we'll help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've seen an example from one school, but I think that demystifying theory of knowledge, explaining why it's important, you know, when it comes to the core, a lot of students say, you know, it's too much, it's too hard, it's extra work. This is one of those elements that really stands out with, well, why, you know, I could just do regular coursework and not have to do the core. But looking at how the value of these individual courses are going to enrich the student experience and prepare them to make those connections that they need to make and advance their understanding of that subject matter. Similarly with the projects, you know, writing a 4,000 word paper can be very daunting, but it's not the last time that a student is going to need to do something like that if they intend to go to college. And I think that when it comes to rigor and our place in the educational scheme, one thing that we do need to break down for parents and students is that we are serious and committed to quality and to advancing skills, but at the same time, this is the safe environment. You're in a space where you have lots of help. You know, we want to help you to become self-regulated, but the teachers are trained, the staff are here to support, there are systems in place to support you, and we want to help you to know how to do this on your own. And there is so much research available. You may even want to quote some of those bits and pieces of research on your website where students talk about how well prepared they are to do to meet the writing demands of university. I mean, students are writing a paper on math, right? They're not just taking a multiple choice test or short answer test. They are in their internal assessment, they're having to articulate the problem solving and to explain why they made the choices that they made in that project. So, you know, those sorts of things, you know, are undeniably a strength of an IB education, well and above, as particularly because they're core. And you know, last week we talked about backward planning from some of these things. How does the extended essay or reflective project play a role in planning your, you know, year one and year two of the program? And probably should have put this one before we talked about the core and explaining it, but here are some of the things that students have said about, the IB. On a positive note, just some of the elements of CAS, how that has helped them to be self-regulated, to think about, the challenges that they're facing and to know that they've got skills that they can implement and draw from. And they're not just one disciplinary sort of set of skills, they are integrated skills as well. And
I
then
like
taking
that.
theory of knowledge, helping me to think critically rather than being passive.
So I think this is a great idea to reach out to universities in your area and ask them for quotes, right? I think that's also a very attractive way to, encourage students and families to consider your school.
For sure. What do they see in IB students that attend?
Yeah, that have attended your school.
Yeah. So we're coming to the conclusion and getting ready for our questions and answers. But before we get there, just a little bit more on teacher-driven promotion. Last week we were talking about approaches to learning skills and some of those other elements of the program that when we become more fluent in those as a collective, community, those become, the essence and the power of our school. But what are the way that that we present, our teachers in either on our websites or in social media spotlights, so that people can find this content. So the courses, or like, how is it that this course is taught? What are the greatest things? How excited am I about this course content? What are the way I support students? These are just some of the things that you might want teachers to talk about in their presentation. It could be written with a picture, it could be a video. And also, many schools forget that they've got IB educators from the IB Educator Network in their midst, and that's a real feather in your cap. If you've got examiners, if you've got people that visit schools or
Workshop
conduct
leaders.
workshops.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's an example from Rainier Beach High School in the United States. This is something that the IB coordinator, Mr. Miller, Steve Miller, in the top left there, actually has been working on as a creative project during quarantine. And the teachers here are pitching the reason why you should take this course. And in some cases, these teachers are kind of competing for students in their own school, but in a jovial and friendly way. It's simply, why would you want to take film studies? Or, this is what you're going to, this is why learning Spanish or French would be beneficial. Why Japanese or Mandarin, etc. And I think deconstructing the math, the issue that we raised before, that I have a personal, experience with, explaining what you're going to learn in math, and look at the friendly smile there on the teacher's face. It's certainly going to appeal to students in a whole different way.
Absolutely.
So just quickly on the social media, I think one of the things that I'll point out here and let you, review this for yourself, is just that a lot of the time, even today, I went through to see if I could find even a few more examples, and I did. But when I looked at, various schools that I already have on lists in my social media accounts, I didn't see a lot of learning oriented, value proposition based things. I saw a lot of announcements, and I think announcements are like, social media is a great way to get a message out quickly. But one thing that you can do is to delete some of those announcement messages once they've passed. An event has passed, or an announcement about closures has passed, or an update on what we're doing with COVID has passed, and we've got a new update coming. But if we remove some of those things, what we're trying to do is create this, this content that is accessible to anybody, anytime, and that current announcement is front and center, perhaps pinned somehow. And then I think even on Instagram, if you're using that, you can create, little profiles. So you could say, this is my announcements page, and the most current announcement is going to be in that list, in that story. And you can go along to thematically link in what students are doing, in the service projects and whatnot. But I think just keeping that, so just thinking, when people arrive, what is it they see? What do they learn about your school without having to scroll too far and to search through the weeds? And, similarly, I think, showcasing the exceptional things that teachers are doing. This teacher has been a contributor to a book on bilingual education. Incredible. I certainly haven't written any books, and I'm sure that There are, but anything that your teachers are doing, even if it's not always related to education, but something that demonstrates that they are creative thinkers, that they're what their interests are, and how students might identify with that.
I think also it's important to keep in mind who your audience is for your social media. I mean, is it your
Yes.
immediate community? And if it is, then you're not going to grow. If it's outside of your immediate community, I mean, I know of schools in the US that have social media to market their school to future students, and then they have social media to market to their current families. So you might want to think about, I know that it's time consuming at times, but you may have somebody dedicated at your school that could separate the messaging according to the audience that you have in mind.
And a lot of these social media platforms actually give you the ability to have multiple people logging in. And
Yes.
on my particular accounts, I can switch between my personal accounts and my professional accounts. And I've had seasons where I've supported maybe an IB World School Association, and they created a new password that I could use, and I logged in, and I was able to help them to get their social media going. And you could split this responsibility beyond one or two people in your school. Maybe five people that are really active in their social media could be helpful, and points of contact for people in your school to send them pictures and give them a little text they can copy and paste. But don't forget your hashtags. It's a great way to appear broadly in people's threads and streams when they're searching.
And frequency as well. I think that's also something that's important, which is a good idea, Phil, that you had about having multiple people at your school that would be willing to keep the feed going, because if you don't keep it going, you'll end up disappearing. And it'll be hard
Exactly.
to regain that, sort of front and center status.
Exactly. I'm always looking for things that I can retweet, and I think that if you use the hashtags, I know that our people managing social media on the organization side are always looking for great stories from students and from schools. You can either use this hashtag, which is great because it links all of our schools together, CP or DP, and there's similar for PYP and MYP. And you can invent some hashtags that you think would resonate with your school or resonate with the IB community. Maybe more people will join you on this idea of lifelong learning and learning to learn. And even just those keywords, inquiry, is a great opportunity to link that as a hashtag. Just some ways to creatively develop, your social media. And here we have a spotlight on creative skills. So the innovation, technological skills in the previous one, and here we have some great creativity that's coming from the student population here. We have lots of resources that you can use. You can integrate students from your own school with other students from around the world. I think it's great to promote that IB and IB experience is a global experience, and that your students do travel. I mean, I meet people on the plane. I meet people when I'm going out to dinner. I have these conversations where it's like, what do you do for a living? Oh, I work for the International Baccalaureate. I did the IB, and it's really fascinating. And I think students can, we underrate that showcasing some of these students that the IB has featured can be really helpful. I've shortened and plucked out a section or a quick description of these students here. You can do so too. But then just creative ways to promote your own students and to showcase them on your own website.
Exactly. That's where I was going to go. I mean, we talked about misconceptions before. You could ask your students, what misconceptions did you have before you came into the DP and CP? And what have you learned now? And you could feature those sort of almost like I used to think and now I think, or, something along that line. Because if your students had those misconceptions, then perhaps other students do as well.
Absolutely. Please feel free to use any of these slides. I've put this here in particular for the CP, but you can adapt this any way you like. But, it's just a great way to sort of highlight some of the key words or the key things, that are positive value elements of being part of an IB education for your students. And lastly, we'll just quickly run through some resources to help grow your CP and DP participation. Like I said at the beginning, we have a new department, this strategic initiatives, innovation and incubation team, like working on what is going to work to support schools. And so we have had a number of webinars that started last year towards the I think it was September or October with David Quinn, an excellent IB coordinator who has an open access IB program in the US and has served students that came to his school not knowing how to speak English proficiently and have successfully completed the IB program and gotten scholarships and are in rigorous universities now. As well as students that come from minority families and may have not and have spoken in video testimony about their first aspiration was to even try and complete high school and then ended up going on to do a PharmD or going on to a master's in education. We had a great webinar on IB DP for Me, is the IB diploma program for me, which was showcased. The presentation is available, the resources we mentioned are available, as well as curriculum, school culture and equity in this strategic series. And look out in May for a similar session on like from the DP, which is going to be focused on the career related program and it might be, your school's interested in investigating the career related program, you want to learn more, or you might want to use that in your school if you're trying to encourage students to think about the CP. We have a landing page that is ever growing with resources, growing the DP. To find this, go to the CP or DP landing page on the IB website, all the way at the bottom, more resources, and you'll find this under the resources for teachers and resources for schools. And we have an IB program community. The most active one right now is the program community for the DP. The CP one is going to be invigorated as we move forward in this new project. But please join our participation. The link will also be provided to you in the resource list on the landing page. So let's jump into some questions.
There is
Absolutely.
one question in the chat. I don't know who's focusing on questions, but maybe students sometimes get confused in either taking DP or CP. So how can we differentiate these two for them?
One thing I think we need to promote, and I don't know that I mentioned it in terms, hopefully it came through thematically, is choice, interest, and flexibility. And I think that coaching students through is to think first and foremost, we're going to be finishing our experience in school in the diploma context or in the career-related program context through a lens of learning to learn. And so what you learn in this situation is going to prepare you and open up your opportunities. So quite often we think that having more choices for students in terms of the different types of curriculum is important, but I think that when we think about how the types of learning experiences students are engaged in are going to open the options for them. As one of our alumni pointed out, Irene said she was like, I didn't really, know for sure what I wanted to do, but the range of subjects, opened up the possibilities for me. That's one way to approach it. And I think that when it comes to the CP requires you to have career-related studies, which is a portion that the IB doesn't create. It's something that is accountable to another body, and we'll be talking about that further in that presentation. But those need to align with student interests, and students are either going to gravitate to those or be less invested in going into computer sciences or whatever it is that you offer, design and technology. So I think that in that case, then, the diploma is a great way to open up those opportunities to study a range of different subjects. But hopefully that, hopefully that answers your question, but it's a win-win either way, because we focus on lifelong learning and opening up those opportunities. Terry, did you want to jump in on that? Or?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah. Another question, Zach?
Yeah, sure. We've got a bunch of questions. So what are your suggestions for being able to give interested students or interested families like a little taste of what it is to be an IB, DP, or CP student?
Oh, this is a good one. I've heard a couple of things. Terry, have you seen anything in your schools?
Well, it depends if you're marketing from students outside, from students inside, if they're trying to make a choice of whether to go into the DP or perhaps another program that you're offering at your school, is to actually have them shadow during a day or a half day so that they can get an actual taste. They can be buddied up with somebody in the DP, and they can experience it for a short period of time with somebody that's going through it right now.
Some schools are also thinking about aspects of the core, say exposing students to the theory of knowledge and scaffolding down to make it really exciting and tangible for students, and bringing in sort of a day in the school or maybe 2 days, one in semester one or semester two, however you're structuring your school year, to spend a moment saying, you know, this is what the IB is going to be like. These are the things that we've been doing in the years prior to prepare you. These are the things that you're going to be leveraging as you make your choices in moving forward. But this is what the learning will feel like and look like. And just spending some time, you know, offering students a survey class, I guess. Observation can be really great too. You know, you might have a day where each ninth grade student who's been new in your school gets to come along and see what they're doing in a science class or in a humanities class, individuals in society. So just thinking about that exposure in the real time. And I think student testimonies are, again, front and center, the student experience, those positive opportunities as well.
You could even create a video, have your students create a video. What's it like to be a DP student in my school? Well, follow me. Let's spend a day together. And then they could create a video that could be added to your website.
There are actually some really good student-initiated videos like that on YouTube. I mean, there's certainly you know, messages that are not as favorable, but there are some students that, you know, unsolicited just said, this is what I recommend you should do if you, and this is how you pick your subjects if you're going to be a diploma student, and this is what I excelled in, and these are the things I struggled with. And it was just, you know, I've seen a couple of those on YouTube, and they're already out there. So, you know, maybe as Terry said, having one of your own students think about creating a little video like that could be cool. Another question, Zach?
Sure. So there's been a couple questions that align with two themes that I think are both practical concerns for students and for parents. So there's a lot of worries about how the IB might impact my child or my own GPA, and also there's this financial concern. Is there anything you can bring up to address some of those concerns?
Yes, I think, I mean, this comes down to the way that we focus on grades as the most important thing, and that's a traditional thing that has been part of education for a very long time. We have to continue to acknowledge that that is important to our stakeholders, it's important to our students, and certainly not to minimize those things. But I think when it comes to the sorts of ways that IB students creatively present themselves when they are applying to universities, it's these things that stand out. There's a great video, and I'll put it in the resource toolkit again, that we had the Assistant Dean of Admissions at Stanford University speaking on the value of an IB education. She speaks not only as an Assistant Dean of Admissions, but she speaks as an IB parent and the sorts of things that she saw develop in her child. And she was concerned too that it would be too much. Those systems of support play a big role there in ensuring you know, that we are at, you know, that there's a starting point and there's a growth process, and we're hoping to send students out into the world as confident lifelong learners. Um, and I think when it comes to cost, which is a little bit of a separate thing, this is a really difficult one for the IB to address because all over the world, the way that the IB is funded is different. Some schools have it wrapped into the tuition fees. You know, some schools establish foundations that they have to support students who may not be able to afford the tuition as well as the IB costs. You know, schools that are self-sustainable need to be able to pay teachers, need to be able to, you know, update their resources and keep their, you know, their facilities running, and that's very expensive. So, you know, there's so much to consider when it comes to cost. I think that what Dr. Sivakumari did recently in removing the student registration fee is huge. And, you know, no longer do we have students having to pay a fee just to be an IB student and pay for all the individual assessments. Another piece to really articulate comparatively is that IB assessment is not just a final exam. IB assessment is includes an internal assessment, which is supported. This year is obviously being, counted in a much more important way than in other years, because it's the evidence of learning that we have for students that cannot sit an exam. But the IA is always important. It's a moment where the teacher and the student get to work together. The skills and the development and the goal setting, along with the rubrics and those outcomes, are very much front and center for that development. And all of those skills apply to when you come to the exam. So I think deconstructing the elements of IB assessment, and this could be a great thing for the way you do this on your website comparatively, to say, here's what students will do and how they'll be assessed in an IB education. If you've got a competitive program, this is what they'll be doing, and how, there's a lot of opportunities, is what I'm saying, for students to demonstrate their learning. And I think that when we come down to what the fee that the IB, has for each of those assessments, all of that, variety of assessment is actually quite cost efficient in comparison to the prices of some of the other competitive programs.
Regarding GPA concerns, utilize your counselors that you have at your school. Most schools have, amazing university counselors, and they can also offer some tips and support for students that have concerns in that area.
Excellent point. I'll provide some slides too that we haven't included in this for time's sake, and because we wanted to really focus on one thing. But there are external resources such as the World Economic Forum and some studies conducted by Heather McGowan that look at the way that the paradigm shift in the world around us, and that lifelong learning is one of the most important things. I think that active learning and learning strategies is number 2 on the priority list for skills for the future of work. And actually relevant for today in the latest 2020 report. But I'll provide some slides in the toolkit so that you could potentially even use that to explain to students and parents that GPA is important, and we're going to help you to grow and help you to do the best that you possibly can. But above and beyond where you end up in the next steps, and plenty of colleges will accept you because
Yes.
you have been well prepared, even if it's not the top college that you have in mind. They can't accept everybody. That's the hard pill to swallow. But all in all, we want to prepare you for success and persevering in college beyond those 2 years, and graduating with a sense of how you're going to apply that learning that you've gained, and it's not just a piece of paper that you've achieved at that next stage of your education. That might be just about all the time that we have, but I do want to point out that we have a couple of ways that you can request some further support or to engage. I will be answering any of the requests that come through the form that you would have seen adjacent to the registration on this series landing page, and we will arrange a call or maybe work through email, whichever suits best. I'm in the United States on Eastern Daylight Time right now, but I'm happy to meet early in the morning or late at night, depending on where you are in the world. And of course, your IB World Schools manager is your central point of contact at the IB.
Yes, that's
Terry?
right. That's right. We're here
And
to
we work
help.
together.
Absolutely.
We work together.
We do. So you do reach out to your IB World School manager. We are here to support you with whatever needs you have. And if it's something that we can't answer, we will direct you to the person who can.
Excellent. So thank you for joining us. The last thing that we have for you is a really inspiring message from Jenny Gillett, who is in our Learning and Teaching department in The Hague. And she has a really important message for students who are considering the IB for the next year, entering in, feeling all the stresses that have been put upon us because of the global pandemic, the time that's been lost in the classroom. Some students might not feel that they are prepared, no matter how hard we try to assure them that we will support them. But from the organization side, down the line, when it's examinations in November and May of 2024, and these new students are making this choice to join the diploma programs will be assessed, that the IB has that covered. So if you have time to stick around, please do so, and we will now play that message. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening or a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you especially to Terry for joining us and for all your expertise. It's been great having you, Terry.
My pleasure. Absolutely.